Hello, everyone. I'm joined by Casores from the Toronto Defiant to talk about everything for the Stockholm end-of-year major in OWCS. But first, Casores, I wanted to start by asking you, you're in Berlin right now for the boot camp, right? How have you found the boot camp?
Boot camp's been great so far. We're staying at the Mad Lions facility, hence all the Mad Lions pictures. But yeah, they've been so gracious to host us since they have an off season right now. It's really nice. I think the players so far haven't been a fan of the food in Berlin, but we made a trip to the doner kebab place, and they all ended up liking that. So
There it is. I saw Vega's tweets on Twitter, and I was like, he's surely just eating the wrong food, you know? Like, he just needs to go get a German kebab, and then everything will sort itself out.
well, he also just tweeted that on the first day
Yeah,
and hadn't had any. He had like one meal, and it was Thai food in Berlin.
yeah.
Um,
There's no good Thai food in Berlin. All right, yeah, we'll just bear that in mind. Have you had a chance to see much of the area or anything like that, or get out away from the computers?
Yeah, since we're extremely jet lagged, or we're extremely jet lagged, I'd keep waking up at 9 a.m. and our scrims would start at 2 p.m. So I went for a walk like every day. RuPaul joined me a couple of the days. Vega joined me one day. Made sure to see the Brandenburg Gate, the Berlin Cathedral, everything. I'm a big history nerd, so I went to the Wall Museum, like the Berlin Wall Museum. That's very interesting. But we're doing 3 blocks a day. We're doing lots of review. So except for that short time in the mornings before we Ubered to the office, not too much to see. But I tried to get out there and see some of Berlin because this is my first time here.
Yeah.
It's relatively close to the Netherlands, but it's still on the very east side of Germany, so it's a far drive.
Well, I think that's, to be fair, that's probably really on the upper end of what people have seen while at their various boot camps. So I think you've done it right.
That is fair.
Before we get into the major and the meta and everything for Stockholm, I wanted to reflect back on stage 4 a little bit, because obviously you probably had your closest push stage, at least really close upper bracket, really close grand final. Where do you think the main problems were for you in terms of why was it closer than maybe we have seen so far this year?
I think throughout this year, our struggle has really been those push and pull metas. You saw it in the earlier stages of the year, especially at Dallas with those Lucio, Kiri, Mauga was mostly meta at that point. And I think just in general, we're better when the game is very slow. So with the Juno coming out and Juno being so incredibly broken, like you can't not play Juno. There's this, especially on these flatter maps, right? Juno is just so strong that we lacked in that department. I also think Nightmare played extremely good. I think Nightmare is one of those teams that, similar to SSG, like relies on their team play very much so. I think they kind of take the Admiral Raptor and put him into that sense. They've been very good. So I think it was a case of Nightmare playing up very much, and I think us not playing as good as we could. I think Infected's best character is Orisa, and he controlled the game very well. And I think their old combos were just better than ours in most of those. Brig, Juno, Orisa, Mirrors. I think their neutral fights were slightly better. They were using the map better. So I think they just played up, and we didn't have good enough of a grasp on how to play Brig Juno. But since then, for this Stockholm major, we've made major strides in that department, I would say.
I was going to ask, because when I've been talking to all of the other teams as well, when we've asked about the meta, the same heroes keep coming up in terms of Bauga, Juno, Brig in most places, even a lot of Reaper Echo, really sort of brawl-heavy composition. So do you feel a lot more comfortable now, maybe in this type of meta in such a big event, than you would have done before?
Yeah, I mean, everybody complained about Juno, and then the patch, like the latest patch we had for this tournament was Orisa being gutted, but Juno being barely changed. So it's just Orisa's out, new tank is in. I think it's no surprise everybody's seeing a lot of Mauga being played. And I think it just comes down to Juno is so broken that you have to play the comp that plays best with and against Juno, and whatever flavor of the month that is. But I think, especially for us, we've started to grasp more and more, especially for this boot camp. We've sat down with the team. We've thrown away some of the egos, and we've really sat down and cracked like everybody's individual job and roles on the team. And I'd say the the way the characters shaped out as well are better for us. We swapped our Juno player. So before it was Vega playing the Juno, swapped that over to RuPaul being our Juno player, mostly because RuPaul and Ham just have such synergy that we felt kind of lacked in our stage 4. I think Vega did a very good job, but I think especially in our Juno ult pushes, I think Ham and RuPaul just have a little bit better synergy on that. So I think that swap's panned out good so far. And yeah, just continuing to improve.
I want to ask a little bit about some of the DPS heroes as well, because a lot of the ones that get thrown around are really a lot of double flex DPS compositions. So there's certain teams, maybe yourselves, and obviously maybe teams like Twisted Vines and even Crazy Raccoon, who have a hit player who is actually primarily a hit scan player and has played their best Overwatch and had their most success on that role. Is it a worry for you that these comps seem to be getting more powerful and you're maybe stuck with a player who can't match some of the teams who have just 2 flex DPS players ready to go?
I think there's a couple of flavors of DPS going around. I feel like that's the most leeway teams are experimenting in. So I won't do too much in the details of like we're playing this, we're playing that. But we found a style that's been really good for us. Merit, he might not be too good at Tracer or on flex DPS heroes, but on characters like Reaper, Sim, and even like May and Venture, he's quite good. So despite it not being like a hard hit scan meta, because you want to play the Juno, the Mauga, and then you want to play DPS that also utilize Cage and Juno really well. We're experimenting with characters like that. We're actually finding some really good success. So I hope Mary can do away with some of those curses where people are like, he can only play hit scan, and if he's off hit scan, they're screwed. But last year, Mary showed he's a very good Reaper. He showed he's a very good Bastion as well. So we're looking to bring out some of those characters that haven't been brought out before all this year because they just haven't been good.
And then I wanted to ask you, from a coach's perspective, the nature is whenever it's in this type of heavy macro meta, the idea is that a coach can have a little bit more influence and you have a chance to design the way and sort of script the way your team plays a lot. When you go into the tournament at Stockholm, how sort of scripted do you actually want your team's sort of decision making and play style to be in terms of here's how we use these ults, here's how we do this? How much do you still want in the hands of the players to just play what's in front of them or play the clutch if they see it?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different variations on that. I think this meta is kind of similar to the goats of metas where everybody's just playing the same thing, so you really want to crack down on it. So what I've especially focused on as a coach is our ult macro and our first fights and how we do like the cooldown rotation in particular. But I haven't been like, we have to take the fights here, we have to take the fights there. I think that is up to the players, but I think the old combos and our general like cooldown rotation and who has what role, like this player should play with the core and this player should flank at this moment, or we're playing this formation like 4-1, 3-2. That's been very much drilled down. I think where the fights take place and whether we want to like kite fights or we want to hard fights, I think I give like hints to the players and I give conditions, but in the end, I have them make the decision in the moment. Because I think if you draw everything out, like, oh, when we have Juno and they don't have Juno, we always go first, right? Then it's going to feel robotic, and I never want my team to play robotic. So while there's a lot of things that are discussed and a lot of ult macro, how we generally do our combos, I don't think we've like knocked it down to a T as much as other teams have, where I won't be like, if we don't get the fight there, then I feel like we start playing like robots. So there's a balance, and I think we struck that quite well.
In general as well, it felt like you really hit your highest point this year at the Esports World Cup, where you were able to play a lot of hero variety, a lot of comp variety, partly because of a battle, maybe largely because of the bans as well. Is there any room in this meta for any other comps or any diversity that will allow you to flex around?
Yeah, there's a couple of maps where people could definitely bring out some stuff, and I think in a tournament setting, people are going to know whether they can win a mirror against a certain team. I don't think we're stuck in like the GOATS era anymore where everybody will just mirror each other. I think it'll be like somewhat clear between teams of which you can beat on the mirror comp and which you can't. And then you're going to have to pull out, so some stops. Like in the upper finals, for example, we felt we were at a disadvantage against Nightmare in the Orisa mirror, and we picked all the maps that weren't the Orisa mirror, and we even didn't play the Orisa on Esperanza, which I think most teams would decide to play the mirror on that map, right? So there's definitely maps like Gibraltar in the pool and Hollywood where you don't necessarily have to play the mirror because it's so vertical. And I think when it comes down to match day, teams are going to know whether they're better at a team or they're worse at the mirror, and they're going to try and exploit weaknesses and find, kinks in people's armor, or they'll lose the first map on the mirror and they'll be like, oh, they're just better at us at the mirror. Let's try and throw it on a different way rather than playing the same exact mirror on free maps and losing. I think teams would do a lot in the OWL era. I think we're kind of out of that. And I think, if teams aren't winning the mirror, they'll pull like a stage 1 Twisted Minds where they couldn't win the Mauga mirror against ENCE, so they played Ramatra, Lucia Moira, which in theory doesn't win against the Mauga comp, but in that moment it worked for them.
You sometimes get it as well when everyone's playing the same comps and people are spending 3 blocks, 2 blocks a day playing the mirror, reviewing the mirror, talking about this, talking about that. When all of a sudden they're thrown a curveball that they've just not played against or they're not used to having to adapt. It can really catch people off guard in terms of like the players have become so locked into playing a certain type of mirror, it becomes harder to swap it.
Yeah. If your mindset is fully focused on, I have to use my, Brig Flail after my Reaper uses Shift so that he can get some space, and suddenly a team rolls out, I don't know, Hammond. If you gets crazy Raccoons, you don't expect it.
It could happen.
That's very dangerous. That's very tough. That's one thing. Like we had at Dallas as well. We were so locked into that Mauga cast Faramir that when they like completely rolled out something they hadn't played in scrims before, we were caught off guard. So I think one thing we focused on is not just locking in and being like, oh, we have to play every exact fight like this because they're going to play this comp. Also being, oh, they can roll out this. So if they roll that out, this is the plan B.
And then I wanted to ask you, as we get into the actual tournament itself, you probably got the sort of toughest opening fixture, at least in terms of the one that feels the most competitive against ENCE. How do you feel going into that series to start the tournament?
I'm really happy we get to face ENCE again. We obviously lost to them in Dallas. Yeah. I think a loss that could have been prevented, and I think they really played up in that tournament. I think they've made a lot of changes since then. We have stayed the same roster, so I really want to show that we have grown throughout the year and could beat ENCE this year. So I think I'm really excited to face them again.
Because of some of the schedule limitations as well, that series against ENCE is going to be a 1st-2 rather than a 1st-3. Do you see this as a benefit or a hindrance, or how do you think this changes the series?
I think it just makes it more volatile. I don't think it's necessarily a benefit or a hindrance. I think it just comes down, in that point, it more comes down to who wins map 1, because then if you win map 1, you get the map free pick, and that makes the series kind of free. So it makes the COF more valuable. So in the end, I would rather have it be a 1st-3. But if you are like, the reason why this decision was made is because they didn't want to B stream anymore. Because one thing I complained a lot about is the B stage was it was crap. It was not great to play from. So I'd rather do a 1st-2 on the main stage and just get used to it than having a B stage. And then some teams do get to play on the A stage, so they're used to the crowd, they're used to the settings and everything. And then you have played one series on the B stage, and you play your first match on that stage. It's not great. Yeah. So I prefer this, but it's not ideal, of course. You'd rather have a 1st-3. It just makes it more volatile. It makes the COF like insanely valuable.
You get map pick on that COF as well, right?
Yes, I think the seeding has just been announced, so I didn't know if we wanted to talk about that, but I think we get the map pick because we're 1st seed NA, they're 2nd seed EU, as far as I know. So we get that map pick, so that should be an advantage for us, it being a 1st-2, but I think it's volatile.
Yeah, It doesn't leave a lot of room for error, right? If you take a little bit too long to find your footing on the stage or in the arena or anything like that, you can just be over before you know it. You know, it
Yep.
could be over in half an hour or something, and then you're stuck playing again later that day as well for your lives.
Yeah, but again, I think I'd rather do this than have a B stage and a B stream that's 4 hours delayed. But it could still be 4 hours delayed, right? But
well, hopefully not. I feel
hopefully not.
Down to 2 at least. Maybe we can at least half it or something. And then, have you scrimmed ENCE at all when you came over, or have you sort of hard avoided them with them being your first opponents?
We have hard avoided them. We scrimmed them like 2 weeks ago. I think we went pretty 50-50, but since then the meta's just changed and everybody's playing something different. I think people were just figuring out what to play at first, and then I think it might have been ENCE actually. It was ENCE or SSG that started playing the Mauga, and then the Korean teams came over and they couldn't win against the Mauga, so they copied the Mauga, and then everybody started playing Mauga.
Yeah, I think SSG have very much been at the forefront of this, of bringing the Mauga into existence for everyone.
Yeah, it just comes down to the Juno ult fights.
And then you've had a chance to play against, I guess, most of the other teams in terms of the Korean teams, all the European teams, and Twisted Minds as well. How do you feel the current power level between the regions is between like EMEA, North America, and Korea?
I still think the Korean teams are the best. I think they just have the highest quality of play. They have like really good break Juno macro. But I think it could be pretty close. If there's any meta where it's going to be close, it's a meta where the push and pull is extremely important, and dive is not meta. That's a main key right there.
Yeah,
no bring Ana is pretty good for the West in general. But I would say if I were to like power rank it, I think Crazy Raccoons is number one. I think it's as long as it's not a Genji mirror. I think Crazy Raccoons is very strong because I think Proper's Genji is miles above Heesang's Genji. But adversely, I think like Heesang's Pharaoh, Heesang's Echo is better than Proper's Pharaoh or Echo, right? So they both have like real strengths. I think the meta shaping in a way that's better for Crazy Raccoons. So I think I put Crazy Raccoons first and Falcons second and all the NA and EU teams.
Then, do you have a current read then on who's stronger between? Obviously, you've not played ENCE, but between Europe and North America. If you, I mean, I guess would you just put yourselves at the top? Maybe not too easy a question.
I think we can punch up to Crazy Raccoons and Falcons, and I think we can beat the EU and the NA teams. We haven't scrimmed each one as regularly, but I think in general, I think with the way we're playing right now, I'm actually really confident. I feel like our calling structure is upgraded a lot since stage 4. It's something we focused on very heavily. And I put myself on top of every team, but if I were to say like, this match should be one we win, and this match is going to be like whoever shows up on the day, I'd say we can beat all the EU teams.
Is there a particular team in this tournament as well you're hoping to face or get a chance to beat?
Well, I really wanted to beat ENCE to start with.
Give a revenge.
So we get that in the first round, so I think that's really good. I think Nightmare's been leveling up a lot in general, so I hope we get to face them somewhere and they make a good run. And, we haven't faced Falcons once this year. So I really want to face Falcons at least one time, go up against Krusty and Juckbuck. Me and Krusty, of course, worked together for so long. So playing them, I think at Esport World Cup, we actually had a really, really good scrim results against them. So we would have been pretty confident against them as well as, we were against Zeta. I think Crazy Raccoons at that tournament were just such a level above. So it's a shame we didn't get to play them there. I think Dallas, they were much stronger than us. But we haven't played them yet, so that'd be cool. And of course, we've only taken a single map off Crazy Raccoons this whole year in a lot of series that we've played them. So I'd like to do better than that at least.
And I wanted to sort of ask as well, what does success look like for you in this tournament? Because obviously winning is the ideal, but is there a certain level where you'd sort of be happy with? Like if you got the best in the West, would you come away from it satisfied, or would it have to be the top spot to really be happy?
I think I'd only be happy with one or two. Right, of course, one would be amazing, but realistically, I think 2 is very, very reachable for us. Just like at Esport World Cup, I think the notion that EU and NA are just fighting for third. I think this is. I don't think it's necessarily true. I think we really want to fight to be first or second.
And then in this type of meta, we're going to see probably a lot of similar compositions or mirror compositions throughout this. What do you think is going to be the deciding factor in a lot of these series? What is going to go right for the winning team or go wrong for the losing team?
It's a good question. I think the ult macro is so important here. I think if you can win one of the Juno ult fights where the enemy team has Juno and you don't, right, where there's a disadvantage, either by kiting the Juno ult successfully or by pulling off a combo with a flank to throw them off guard and being able to get like a really good Brig rally stun. I think that's really decisive. If you can win the fight where the enemy team has Juno ult and you don't, you can win the next fight with your own Juno ult and you could snowball a map very easily. So it comes down to Juno ult fights and it comes down to ult macro. And that comes down to like team's creativity, If you're just going in like 5 against 5, the team with Juno ult's just going to win. So in those Juno ult fights where you don't have Juno ult but they do, you need to create an imbalance. And whichever team could do that best, I think that's what will matter the most.
I think it's probably can't really be understated how important is a lot of the time in this meta or in these types of metas. You're not just almost playing for this fight, but the way in which you win this fight will determine the next 2 or 3 fights in terms of their favor and where you have your big advantages and not. And there's almost like a, what do you call it? Like a having your serve and not having your serve. You got to make sure you hold your serve, but if you can have a break for your opponent's serve, it can be a big momentum shift.
Yeah, it's not a very of course there's a lot of individual skill involved, but there's no like Widows or Cassidy's making picks left and right, which I think changes it so much to just being an ult-based meta. And I think if you can win the disadvantageous ult fights, that like makes all the difference.
All right, thank you very much, Casores. Best of luck to you and the team on Stockholm and safe travels. I'll see you there.
Thank you for having me. See you there.